Welcome back. I'm excited. Today is a little bit of a different day. I'm excited to introduce my new co-host, Nick. Welcome, Nick. Thanks for joining us and excited to link arms with you, man.
Thanks, JT. I'm excited to join you on the show, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation today. I'm happy to introduce our guest this week, Ben Hartmere, CEO of Map My Customers. Ben is an expert on the challenges faced by sales leaders and has over 20 years of experience in all areas of revenue and profit generation, particularly for technology companies. Ben, how are you? Thanks for joining us today.
Super excited to be here. Thanks, guys.
So today, Ben, we get to pick your brain on the evolution of the sales organization, specifically the challenges that outside sales leaders face and what successful field sales teams are doing to stay relevant in the marketplace.
So, look, you and I, JT, have been in sales for a really long time. And I can go back to my mom who owned her own small business. And I can remember as a young guy helping her load CRM. And she had a database because she had a lot of leads and she was trying to track it. We're talking, not to date myself here, but the mid 80s. And then in the decade or so that followed, the inside sales team really started to pick up the cadence. And they were starting to run their motions around having good sales process in place, supported by sales CRM. In the field sales team, they've always done things a little bit differently. And you know that, right? You're in the field even more than I am. We're seeing the landscape changing. And we're seeing it change pretty rapidly. Our market, the field market, is understanding the value of having a good system of record in place. And that's what we support, right? Having better data at their fingertips so they can just be more valuable when they're on site with customers.
Why do you think this is happening in field sales specifically now?
The folks that are in the field, they're a group that relies heavily on relationships. They are a lot of our sales leaders and their top sales reps, the ones that have been there for decades, they know their customers at a personal level. And so the thought of bringing in a system to say, well, let me just track you. Let me come in and why don't you just add to your long list of things that you got to do in a given week? Why don't you just log a bunch of notes so that we have them? That's where the pushback came in. In the inside sales market, people move far more frequently on to the next role. So you really need that database. In our world, people do tend to spend decades at the same company. That's because they love what they do, and the companies that that are behind them, they're producing good product or good services, and the customers are awesome. So that's been why it's been slow. Why is it picking up? I mentioned a couple of minutes ago that part of it is that the digital group is coming in and they're saying we need to track. It just seems like the right thing to do, but there are good reasons behind it. And the top sales leaders at the top organizations that we work with can answer that question of why are we entering the data. So the why, and I'll ask JT to jump in here as well. It's about predictability. If you have sales teams that are doing incredibly well, or let's go even further, if you have sales reps that are doing really well, why are they doing well? What is it that they're doing that makes them better than the other reps inside your organization? Look, a lot of the answers are a lot of times because they've got a better territory, or because they're just more personable, or they've been there longer, or whatever the case may be. But there is probably something or some things that they're doing to help make them top of the class. So as we think about it, and as our customers think about it, they want data to support what's driving those sales leaders so they can repeat the process. And if you don't have the data in your system, and I know this sounds obvious, but we'll get into why orgs don't always do it right away. Jump into the let's collect data so that we can determine what's working and then scale that. But that's the biggest thing. I think they're seeing that some of these reps are towards the tail end of their career. So some of the times, Nick, it's driven by the fact that, look, we only have 5 years left of JT Senior, and then he's going to ride off into the sunset after a phenomenal 40-year career. How do you plan for that? So it's predictability, it's forecasting, and it's transition. And I think a lot of the orgs that we're working with are starting to think through those things.
There's hunger out there, right? There's people who want to start adopting these new processes and technologies. And JT, you talk to a lot of these folks too. What's going wrong? Why is it so slow to pick up in this market?
Yeah, so the retiring aging workforce, that is a major risk. the way they've always produced revenue of shaking hands and going to the familiar accounts, it's not the same. Younger reps, they expect tools to help them do their job efficiently, to point them in the right direction. You can't hand an atlas to a 23-year-old and say, go get them. They're going to look at you and go, what do I do with this thing? They can't leverage that. Secondly, the reluctance to dive into being a data-driven organization from an outside sales perspective. You've got fail after fail of implementations from the really large CRMs, because this is the old saying, square peg, round hole. I come from Salesforce. Salesforce, largest of the big boppers with the CRM. You've got Dynamics, SAP, Oracle, HubSpot. Even HubSpot, unbelievably easy to use, not designed for an outside sales rep. So the old saying back in the 80s was nobody ever got fired for buying IBM. Now it's 2024. People still say, well, nobody ever gets fired for buying Salesforce, but it's the wrong product for a specifically focused outside sales engine go-to-market strategy for outside reps. Buying the wrong technology can give nervous ticks to the outside reps, and then you've got reluctance, you have adoption issues, and then you never get the data that you were supposedly sold that you would get in the first place.
What is it about field sales? What are their unique needs there that Salesforce is just, or some of these other platforms aren't meeting?
I've had the privilege of doing a lot of ride-alongs over the last 3.5 years in my time with Map My Customers. And I still stand dumbfounded at the sheer volume of men and women that are responsible each and every morning to put hands on the steering wheel, responsible for the go-to-market engine of their company, of building awareness on who their company is, educating customers on what their company does, and then building and nurturing relationships, all in a face-to-face manner. Ben, you and I, we grew up just pounding the phones with cold calls. Make your 100 dials a day, make your 150 dials a day. These guys are doing anywhere from 8 to 20 stops a day, doing cold calls in person. What I stand dumbfounded with is the sheer volume of administrative tasks that get in the way and that fall on the shoulders of an outside sales rep. They're constantly fielding calls throughout their day while they're on the road, in between appointments. They're constantly getting texts. They're constantly getting emails. And they have to take care of all of this stuff administratively while not sacrificing the volume of face-to-face relationship building appointments. And so, specific to your question, to actually answer it, Salesforce, not mobile first or mobile friendly. I think anybody that listens to this, they can kind of give a courtesy chuckle to me, because they probably have a nervous tick from any time that they had a responsibility to leverage the Salesforce mobile app. It's not able to efficiently help them know who to see, when to see them, and log relevant data that will help them in the future. It's just not designed for them. My favorite line is Salesforce, SAP, Oracle, Dynamics, Pega was all designed for desk jockeys, not for outside field sales reps.
Let me stack on top of that, because JT, you hit on something of multiple failed CRM, or let's even say there's a bunch of CRMs that plateau, and they plateau well before they even get to a point of reasonable value for an org. And why is that? It's essentially, there's always going to be a small cohort of top sales reps in your organization that are going to drive the vast majority of sales. And many podcasts could be broken down, and other topics that will sort of break apart of how do you distribute a little bit more? How do you maybe have more than just a first line on your hockey team that's scoring all the goals? But when you look at why CRMs don't roll out properly, there isn't buy-in from those, I'm just going to pick a number, top 3 reps. And here's where it falls down. Those top 3 reps, I'll stick with made up numbers, driving 60, 70% of your revenue. And a lot of times when a CRM comes out, because again, these folks have been there for 30 years, this is your 4th attempt at CRM. And so they're just going to wait it out. And so part of what you need to do is you need to look at, from a leadership perspective, if you've had a conversation with us or anybody in this space, and you say, all right, we're inefficient, right? And we have CRM, but even that's not working out. You got to, before you really jump into the project, you've got to go get those 3 top reps and get their buy-in, not 100% of their buy-in, but enough that they say, okay, I'm not going to block the progress on this particular project. So how do you do that? Right? You have to explain to them why this version, if you're using Salesforce, it's built for cross-departmental ERP level tracking. It's not for reps that are in the field. So if you have reps in the field, you need a solution that's built for them. So you start with, okay, guys, this is why we need the data. We want to take the administrative activities that are just, their time sucks. They don't make you the money. So if a Map My Customers layers on top of that, or a lot of times we're our CRM, a standalone CRM of record, and ease of use is what is really what we're always going to be after. But you can say to the sales reps, this is going to increase your volume of meaningful activity. And with that, if you can not type in notes because it's labor intensive and you got to do it when you get back to your home office after being on the road for days at a time, if you can do it while you're in the field, because it's just easy to do, then you're able to see one or two more customers over, pick a time span, day, two, whatever it might be. And then you're going to start to see the reps understand the value, what a solution like ours can do for them. So you have to look at Failed CRM and know that you've got to get buy-in from your top reps. You've got to find out, and it's not, they don't have to be the tail wagging the dog, but you got to get their buy-in. And once you get their buy-in, the other 30 reps that you have are going to look to those 3 sales leaders and say, well, if they're doing it and I want to be like them, I better follow their lead. So I think a big part of it is a cultural component. Think about those reps and start, we've said this culturally all the time, start with the why and answer that question for them. This is why we're doing this. And if you don't have that lined up front, they're going to mentally fade out as you're saying, hey, this is a project we're kicking off. They'll wait you out. 6 months later, it won't work. And now you've got your 4th failed CRM 2.0 or 4.0 sort of in the books. So that's kind of some thoughts. The tech's there. You got to explain why the tech matters. And then you got to go get the buy-in from those top reps. That's what we've seen, at least, JT, when we get strong adoption, I should say.
Adoption's got to be important for any big change like that. But what are the other things that some of these teams who are just really killing it, what are they doing differently?
So I would almost go the other way on this response, and JT will nod his head as soon as I say this. It's sales leadership, where JT has the most amount of fun. And I know you love talking to everybody, and everybody's sort of all over their evolution of how they're running their sales team. But when you stay really strong sales leadership, they already have it. They've got it thought through, and they understand the value. And this is probably your easiest demos and your easiest sales. Not that they're easy. Even these things still take sometimes months, if not quarters. But you see strong sales leadership that is thinking through the value of a purpose-built field sales CRM and what that can do for their team. They've thought through the metrics. They've thought through how a better system, a better process, really at the end of the day, helps them fulfill why most of them are in sales leadership, because they love doing it. They love teaching the next generation. They want to see those kids make more money than even they're making, right? They've already thought through that. They're coming to the call well-informed, and that just accelerates everything through that sort of transformational approach towards bringing in a better way of selling.
Yeah, I would add the companies that are killing it have somebody at the exec or the leadership level that fundamentally understands what drives revenue in the first place. They don't start with, it's time for us to be a data-driven organization, so we're going to go get Salesforce or Dynamics. They start with, we know that X drives revenue. What do we do? What do we measure? What do we implement that will help us increase X, revenue producing activities? Understanding what drives revenue first. I would say that the vast majority of our ideal customer profile has somebody at the C-suite, the executive level, that clearly says relationships are key. Like that's fundamentally almost a no-brainer phrase or statement to make for an outside sales-driven organization. The thing that I continue to learn, and this will probably be a little controversial to some of the listeners, I'm now confidently opinionated enough, having done so many ride-alongs, that I will say showing up is 90% of the battle to revenue. And what I mean by that, you can take a mediocre outside sales rep in terms of articulateness in front of a customer, understanding of the market, because the vast majority of our customer base are selling to their customers who always need what they're selling or manufacturing or producing. So, case in point, I did a ride along recently with a steel manufacturer. The customers that he goes and sees always need steel. These are commercial contractors, subcontractors, and distributors. One of the pieces of feedback that they gave this gentleman: we ordered 1 million pounds of steel from you 3 years ago. This is the second time we've seen you in the last 24 months. Show up. Show that you care. Make a regular, concerted effort to understand their business and be available when they need you. Be proactive. You're going to continue to get those orders because this company follows through on customer service. On the sales end, he was falling down with consistent, regular face-to-face contact. One last point, what the most successful companies are doing, they don't just say, oh, Billy's our top rep in the Florida market. He's crushing it. They actually look at the data and go, $7 million is coming from 80 accounts. He's got 300 other accounts that he's not paying attention to at all. So the most successful companies go, holy smokes, what if we bring in 1 or 2 more Billies in the Florida market? And that Florida market goes from a $7.5 million territory to a $21 million territory within 12 to 18 months. So data matters to maximize the revenue optimization within a territory. You can't just say, Billy's awesome. Keep going, Billy. You're leaving money on the table.
We're all human, right? You can only drive so many miles a day. You can only physically visit so many people in a given month or year. So why not, in that example, add another rep or two to maximize that territory?
I would have one more thing, and I wish that I came up with this tagline. I did not. This is from a sharp dude that leads a healthcare life sciences organization, hundreds of sales reps. And what he's holding his team accountable, they have Salesforce. Salesforce is not accomplishing what he's after, which is breadth, depth, and frequency. So let me just break those down really quickly and we can move on. But breadth, if you have 300 ideal customer profile target accounts in your territory, are you actually getting across the entire breadth of your territory? Are you meeting with the full scope of your customer list? Depth, are you multi-threading within each of those accounts and developing relationships with multiple stakeholders across all of those accounts? And then lastly, are you spending the right amount of time with each account? So a small account, maybe you need to see once every 6 months. Some of your top accounts, maybe you need to see once or twice a month. If you're not accomplishing breadth, depth, and frequency, you're leaving revenue on the table.
I mean, so you talk about that, and that can be very data informed, right? But I think one of the things that we see too is a lot of companies have a ton of data, but they don't know what to do with it. So what are the things that some of these people are looking at to gauge whether they're hitting the breadth, depth, and frequency?
Look, I don't want to be the ex-Salesforce alum that just, like bashes my former company. Salesforce is a fantastic company with amazing products, just not specifically designed for outside sales reps. We've already talked about the administrative burden that an outside sales rep has to deal with day in and day out. And so accurately planning and knowing who to see and when to see them can take a really huge effort without the right platform in place. So if you're looking at lists of data in your CRM, I'll tell you right now, whether you're a tenured top outside rep or a brand new rep, your boss is going, get out in front of customers, get out in front of customers. They don't take the time to run reports within Salesforce and then go, okay, I've got 15 top accounts that I should see this month. Where are they in relation to each other? And how do I optimize my travel around them? They get in the car and they go to one and then go, now who do I see? So it drives inefficiency if you're not just making it very plain and easy for a rep to maximize time with the right accounts at the right time. So in terms of data, actually, I'll give you an example. One of my favorite customers is Biodesics. It's a med diagnostic company out of Colorado. They help detect early stage lung cancer. Fantastic company that we get to take part in and like legitimately help save lives, which is awesome. That's how we look at it. And so they have Salesforce as their core record of CRM, but they were not driving the amount of diagnostic tests that they knew needed to take place in all of their markets. They use volume of tests performed by each pulmonologist each month. And anytime there's a drop in the number of diagnostic tests, they very simplistically change the pin color within Map My Customers. And a rep goes, oh my gosh, we have a dip. I'm going to see Dr. Murray. And the very next month, tests are back up above the mean, which is absolutely fantastic because it's a relationship reminder. When Mr. Smith comes in and he needs a test, don't forget about biodesics. And boom, numbers go right back up.
There's also something that we're starting to see, and that sales is on the front lines of customer communication. And maybe you have an account management team, but by and large, they're also indirectly doing sales. You're going to see every department inside your organization starting for that direct communication that you're having with the customers to make the products better, the services better, everything that you can do to remain highly competitive. And I think that a lot of times we're looking at good systems of record. It's not just sales that matter, it's the whole lifeblood of the organization. We had one of our customers. They're in the automotive manufacturing space. It was interesting because their sales reps were, at the beginning, they had great sales leadership. My customers was going to happen. But the reps are sitting there going, look, we're just fine. We're hitting our numbers and the like. And this particular leader said, okay, let's do this. If you guys want to continue to just ad hoc our way through sales, what I'm going to do, and of course, he's saying this tongue in cheek, but the crux of the message landed hard and well, I suppose. He said, I'm going to go down to the operations team, the manufacturing team, and I'm going to say, look, today's Monday. I know we've been doing it this way. And these guys are building transmissions, right? So operational excellence matters. If things are off by a tenth, or, I'm not that much of a gearhead, so I couldn't tell you at what point things start to rattle and pop off the truck on the highway, but it's probably not much. And he said, what we're going to do as a sales organization, we're going to walk down to the line and we're going to say, guys, I know we do this and we're best in class and all this stuff, and you know where I'm going with this. Why don't you guys that are building these transmissions just do it whatever way you want? Get creative. If you think that this process, this well-defined process that again delivers a best-in-class transmission, isn't exactly what it should be, just do it your own way and don't log anything. Just have at it. And the sales team that was it, because that was the way the whole organization was run. So why doesn't sales, because they're benefiting from this process excellence, be accretive to that, to the sort of that edge that they had, that competitive edge that they had. So I just thought that was, and that's just great leadership. I don't know if he had thought through that, but that was one of the things with the sales team. There's nothing, you can't come back from that. There's no disputing it after the fact. So I just thought anecdotally that was kind of a clever way to just say, look, process matters, and we're going to be part of that. We're going to be part of that engine, no pun intended.
I love that example. That's one of our favorite customers.
And I think you're speaking to a larger trend, right? Like companies have historically, put money and attention on things that need to be better, right? And so for a long time, we're willing to accept sales as kind of this creative lone wolf. You either are doing well on your own or not, and we'll find out at the end of the month. But now we're seeing this shift to more process-driven sales. What can our listeners do today to kind of take some of these examples and apply it to what they're doing in the workplace? Because, you can't set up a CRM in a day, right?
You cannot. If you start looking long-term, you've got to begin with the sales rep in mind. I think I've shared this on prior podcasts, but at Salesforce, the go-to-market strategy where an AE is responsible to get in the room with the C-suite, the VPs, and essentially present, look at the data, dashboards, analytics, the reporting that you're going to get from this. And everybody in the C-suite and the VP level is going, oh my gosh, if we had that data, we would rock life. And the actual user experience that's responsible to get that data in to produce those wonderful visual reports, dashboards, and analytics is never taken into consideration. So start with what drives revenue, start with what is on your outside sales rep's plate to begin with, and then build up from there. Because if you take care of the value equation of this would provide value to my outside sales reps, and it's easy to use, you get value and ease of use, you actually end up with the data that you're pursuing and that you're hopeful of getting. That'd be my recommendation.
So that from a bottoms up approach, that's 100%. If I look at it from a top down approach, here's the question that I ask sales leaders if they're saying, well, do I really need to make a change? Do I need to adjust in any way? Here's the question that I always ask of them. And you can adjust the number here. I ask them, if you were given $10 million to invest in your sales team, how would you deploy that money? Where would you deploy that money? And I don't need an immediate answer, but if you can't within 15 seconds start to hit the whiteboard and bullet out where you would go with those funds, how quickly you would deploy it, then you don't have a good system of record. Because the only thing that should be holding your sales team back, unless you've got a product that is struggling competitively within the market because your competitor or competitors have come up with something that is better, cheaper, faster. I can understand maybe you're in the R&D phase and you're going to wait to leapfrog competition, but now's not the right time to invest in sales marketing. Fine. If that's your response, then that's your response. But if you have a very good product and I give you $10 million unencumbered and say, go put it into your sales team, and you can't tell me where you're going with that money, you have a data problem. And that is the quickest way to get a sales leader to recognize whether she's got gaps in her process or not. For our listeners that have stayed in, just ask that question. And if it's not 10 million, if it's 5 million, if it's 100 million, pick a number. But if you don't know where it's going to go, then you're suboptimized.
That's a good one.
Yeah, I think that maybe there's not an action they can take today, but I think it's to ask yourself, where is the problem? Is it with your systems? Is it your data? And those are some good questions to kind of figure out where to start.
Here's another thing, and I think this warrants another podcast, from this group. We talked about these field sales rep leaders. They're driving, again, a high percentage. A handful of them are driving a high percentage of your revenue. I would venture to make a pretty easy bet that they're on the back half, they're on the back nine of their career. When they retire, what's your plan? And it goes back to the $10 million question. Okay, no, we're all set. I've got these reps. They know our market like the back of their hand. That's great. What happens when they either win the lottery or they've crushed it for so long that they've got enough zeros in their bank account that they give you, great if they give you a year's notice. What happens if they give you, what if they give you 2 weeks or 3 weeks? What's your plan? And if you don't have a good plan around how to transition from that small cohort of sales leaders driving all your revenue to the next generation, then you've got a gap in your system. You've got a gap in your process, because there's a lot of ways to sort of peel that banana, but I would say it is something that this audience ought to be thinking through.
These are some great questions for sales leaders to ask themselves to identify where they can start focusing on improving what's going on for their teams. One of the things that JT, I think that we talked about before this is there's like a lot of sales leaders are sitting there, they're looking at the dashboards, they're doing stuff, but they're not necessarily taking that data and applying it to the day-to-day management of the team. They're just seeing, are you making your stops? Are you doing these things? Instead of being kind of, CRM cop, like what's the kind of stuff that sales leaders should be doing out there?
I love that example. I will tell you, if an outside sales leader is just looking at the dashboards, that is one of the key reasons why outside sales specifically loathes Salesforce, Dynamics, Oracle, Pega, all of those. I always get kind of dumbfounded because the vast majority of outside sales leadership now moved into outside sales leadership because they were a successful individual contributor for a territory for 25, 30, 35 years. Ultimately, I shouldn't say it this rudely, but they fall into this habit of being a support specialist for their team, where they're answering, hey, what do you need, man? Like, that's their one-on-ones. What do you need help with? Versus actually proactively leading new, middle, and tenured reps to revenue. They have no ability right now to be strategic and say, hey, you haven't seen this account. There's gold there. Let's go dig together. Or why has this account been such a stronghold with one of our top competitors for 3 years and you've never gone in there to go in and try to get a chink of the armor? By all means, you should be a servant leader, but you should never rely on reactiveness as your mode of leadership. There's a major opportunity to actually show your reps where the gold is, and you need to be strategic and have visibility to do so.
That's a really good point. Being a servant leader doesn't mean being a passive leader, right?
Yeah, and I love that. Culture is another big part of it, right? How do you create a winning culture within your organization? And so that's a lot of it's going to be the personalities you bring in. You want to bring in people that are optimistic, but not overly so, right? They'll challenge the organization, but do it in a way that is not so myopic that they're always going, what's in it for me? They want the organization to win because it's just how they are wired, right? Great team players. And then on the process side, JT's going to hate this example, but I grew up in Boston. I'm a big Patriots fan. And what made that team so sustainable for 2 decades was a commitment, not only to the team, but also to a process. The team, no individual, including Tom Brady, was greater than what was most important to the collective. And that led to some hard decisions that they'd have made. It's, again, probably another podcast for another day, but they hung on probably because of Tom Brady, and you have a Tom Brady in your organization. Maybe you are the Tom Brady. So you do need some top talent, absolutely. But name me a wide receiver or a running back that was on that team that's in the Hall of Fame. There are none. And it's because they, as a group, the 11 guys, at least on offense, defense probably a little bit better, they played better than any other team that they would play on any given Sunday with 2 or 3 rock stars. So as you're looking at the culture, transform your team of 3 into a team of 11 or better, right? And for individuals, like, think about this at the individual level. We're talking about the organization and what great process and great systems can do for the org. It lifts it up and to the right. Well, company's made up of individuals. So if you're listening to this podcast and you're saying, well, how do I progress my career? Follow the same within the lists of things that you're responsible for. Be incredibly organized and very data driven, very process driven, very predictable. I'm not using that as a negative word inside of your specific role. And you're going to be so good at that the organization, whether it's this one or another one, if they don't see it, they're going to move you up and then up and up. You are a servant leader, as JT mentioned, trying to get the next generation into a really good spot where they can live a higher quality of life. You have responsibility for that. And you can deliver much more soundly on that if you have a well-defined process and system of record. So that's kind of at least my closing thoughts on what sales leaders and individuals like sales reps should be thinking through.
That's great advice for folks too. I think it's really easy to kind of get tunnel vision with the role you're in and not necessarily think about the wider landscape for the business. Well, Ben, thank you so much for joining us today. This was really fun. JT, thanks for letting me join the show with you, and we'll steer this ship together going forward. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Ben, before we close it out? Any final thoughts?
No, excited to be part of this. I think it's a lot of times we're having hundreds of conversations with some very impressive, inspiring sales leaders. So I think we sort of bear a responsibility to get this podcast stood up in a way that we're sharing some of the great ideas that are out there. So excited to be part of it.
Guys, thanks a bunch for listening. Nick, Ben, always a pleasure to brainstorm with you guys and share all the experiences with our audience. So thanks, everybody.